The Israel-Palestine conflict, rooted in a letter written by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour on November 2, 1917, to Lord Walter Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. The contents of this letter would ignite a dispute that would persist for centuries to come, a consequence the British government likely never anticipated. The question of who is right or wrong between Israel and Palestine, the core of their conflict, and the role of the British government in this ongoing struggle remains one of the most controversial topics in the world. The aim here is to remain neutral, focusing solely on facts and figures to ensure no one can dispute the information presented. Before World War I, Palestine was a peaceful region with a predominantly Muslim population, but Jews and Christians also lived there harmoniously. At the time, the area was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which spanned parts of Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. Some Arab leaders, frustrated with Ottoman rule, sought independence and secretly allied with the British, who promised them an independent state in exchange for support against the Ottomans during the war. Similarly, the British made promises to European Jews, who had long been a stateless people facing persecution and discrimination across Europe. The Jews, who had no homeland of their own, were often treated as minorities wherever they lived. In Europe, they faced severe anti-Semitism, rooted in religious conflicts dating back centuries. Many Christians blamed Jews for the death of Jesus Christ, fueling centuries of hatred. Despite this, the global Jewish community was well connected and began advocating for a homeland in Palestine, a movement known as Zionism. Initially, some Jews opposed this idea, arguing that they shouldn't have to leave their homes due to anti-Semitism. However, Zionism soon gained political momentum, and Jews worldwide began migrating to Palestine, supported by funding from their communities to establish businesses and settlements. Fast forward to 1917 during World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was on the brink of collapse. On November 2, 1917, Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to Lord Rothschild, stating that the British government supported the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This letter, known as the Balfour Declaration, assured that the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine would not be compromised. A month later, British forces captured Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. However, the British had ulterior motives. They wanted a future ally in the region to secure their interests. While they promised the Jews a homeland, they also secured a commitment from the Jewish community to remain loyal to Britain. After World War I, Palestine came under British control, and the British actively encouraged Jewish immigration and settlement. However, the Arab population, already living in Palestine, felt betrayed. They believed the British had disregarded their right to self-determination. In 1919, Balfour even wrote in a memorandum that there was no need to consult the Arab population about their wishes. The Arabs viewed British policies as favoring the Jews, and tensions began to rise. Jewish immigrants established schools, factories, and even a small militia called the Haganah. The Arabs, feeling increasingly marginalized, began to resist. By 1939, Arab resistance had grown, but the British responded harshly, arresting leaders, exiling some, and even executing others. To address the unrest, the British formed the Peel Commission, which proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. However, the Arabs rejected this plan, as they saw no justification for dividing their land. The conflict continued until 1939, when the British issued a white paper rejecting the Peel Commission's recommendations and limiting Jewish immigration and land purchases. This move angered the Jewish community, leading to clashes between Jews and the British. World War II further complicated the situation. The Holocaust, in which 6 million European Jews were killed by Nazi Germany, left many survivors with no option but to seek refuge in Palestine. Despite British restrictions, Jewish immigration to Palestine surged. Meanwhile, the Zionist movement continued to resist British rule, and by 1947, the British, exhausted from the war and unable to manage the conflict, handed the issue over to the United Nations. At the time, Palestine's population was approximately 1.3 million Arabs and 630,000 Jews. The UN proposed a partition plan, giving 55% of the land to the Jews and 45% to the Arabs. This decision, approved by the United Nations General Assembly in 1947, was met with outrage by Arab nations, who rejected the plan. India, a member of the UN at the time, also voted against the partition, with Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru accusing the Zionists of attempting to bribe Indian officials. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The very next day, neighboring Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, launched an attack on Israel. Despite being outnumbered, Israel, with support from Western countries and a strong military, emerged victorious. By the end of the war, Israel had expanded its territory beyond the UN partition plan, capturing West Bank and Gaza Strip, which were originally designated for the Arab state. In 1967, another Arab-Israeli war broke out, resulting in Israel capturing even more territory, including the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. The Palestinian people, now displaced and without a state, formed the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, to fight for their independence. Initially, the PLO used armed struggle, including hijackings and attacks, leading the US and Israel to label it a terrorist organization. However, by 1974, the UN recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In 1979, Egypt became the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel, signing a peace treaty that returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. However, this move led to the assassination of Egypt's prime minister by extremist groups opposed to the agreement. Meanwhile, Israel continued to establish settlements in the West Bank, despite international condemnation. The 1990s saw renewed peace efforts, culminating in the Oslo Accords between Israel and the PLO. The agreement divided the West Bank into three areas: Area A, under Palestinian control; Area B, joint control; and Area C, under Israeli control. However, the peace process was derailed in 1995 when an Israeli extremist assassinated Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin for his role in the peace talks. In 2006, Hamas, a militant group opposed to the PLO's peace efforts, won the Palestinian elections, leading to a split in Palestinian governance. Today, Hamas controls Gaza, while the PLO governs parts of the West Bank. The conflict between Israel and Hamas continues with periodic escalations, such as the recent rocket attacks by Hamas on October 7, 2023. The Israel-Palestine conflict, shaped by a century of promises, betrayals, and violence, remains unresolved. My goal was to present the facts without bias, allowing you to form your own opinion. What are your thoughts on this complex issue? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.